I want you to think about the most ordinary moment of your week. Not a significant moment. Not a moment you would remember or photograph or tell someone about. The most ordinary one. Tuesday evening, maybe. Couch. Television on, but not really watched. Your phone in your hand, scrolling without destination. The person you have built your life with sitting close enough to touch. The comfortable quiet of two people who have been together long enough that silence is not absence. It is simply the texture of an ordinary evening. Now I want you to imagine that your phone rings. Unknown number. You almost don't answer. But something, habit, curiosity, the particular reflex of a man who has always picked up, makes you slide your thumb across the screen. A voice. Professional. Polite. A woman from your bank's fraud prevention department, calling to verify a large transaction currently being processed at a branch across town. You sit up slightly. You say yes, you're listening. She describes the transaction. $47,000. A joint account withdrawal. She says the gentleman presenting the request has provided valid identification, a driver's license, your name, your account number, and has correctly answered 2 of the 3 security questions. You say, "I'm sorry. What gentleman?" She says, "Your wife is here, sir, with her husband. He's the one initiating the withdrawal." And here is the part one need you to sit with. You look to your left. Your wife is sitting on the couch beside you, close enough that your shoulders are almost touching. She has been there for the past 40 minutes. She is looking at the television. Or she was, until the moment you said, "I'm sorry. What gentleman?" Because now she is very, very still. Your wife is sitting next to you. And somewhere across town, at a branch of your bank, a man who is not you is standing at a teller's window with your identification, your account number, your name, and a woman who is not your wife, attempting to withdraw $47,000 from the account you share with a woman currently sitting frozen on your couch. The teller is still talking. She is describing him. Medium height, she says. Dark hair, graying at the temples. Mid-40s. Well-dressed. Very calm. You do not say anything for a moment, because she has just described you. My name is Nathan Calloway. I am 47 years old. And what happened in the next 72 hours is the most disorienting, most clarifying, and most consequential experience of my life. Welcome back to the channel. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every opportunity to play it straight. They had every chance to walk away clean. They just chose the hard way. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe. You're going to enjoy this one. Let me tell you who I was before that Tuesday evening, because I think it matters. Not because I was exceptional, because I was ordinary in the ways that make what happened so completely destabilizing. If this had happened to someone whose life was already complicated, whose marriage was already troubled, whose finances were already in question, it would have been a different story. It happened to someone whose life was, as far as he knew, entirely fine. I am 47 years old. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, the second of 3 sons of a high school football coach and a woman who taught 3rd grade for 32 years, and who I consider to be the most fundamentally decent human being I have ever encountered. I went to Ohio State on a partial academic scholarship, studied accounting, graduated in 1999, and went to work for a regional firm where I spent 7 years learning the craft before moving to a corporate finance role at a mid-sized manufacturing company where I have worked ever since. I am, in the most accurate sense of the word, a numbers man. I find comfort in precision. I find satisfaction in accounts that reconcile, in projections that prove accurate, in the particular neatness of a quarterly close that lands exactly where the model said it would. I am not a dramatic person. I do not seek out conflict or complication. I am the man at the party who is genuinely happy talking to two people in a quiet corner rather than working the room. I am the man who reads the same three authors on rotation because I know what I like, and I find no inadequacy in that. I have been married to Diana for 16 years. I want to tell you about Diana the way I understood her before that Tuesday, because the person I am going to describe is real. She existed. She was the woman I loved, and I do not think honesty requires me to retroactively flatten her into a villain simply because of what I found out. People are not one thing. That is the most uncomfortable truth this story contains, and I would rather face it directly than sand it smooth for easier listening. Diana is 44 years old. She is the kind of beautiful that is more about presence than features. The way she occupies a room, the quality of her attention when she gives it, the laugh that is completely unperformed, and which I fell in love with before I fell in love with anything else about her. She is a landscape architect, genuinely talented, with a portfolio that includes 3 public parks in the Columbus metro area and a commercial development downtown that won a Regional Design Award in 2019. She is also, as I understand now in a way I did not understand before, a person who had learned very early how to keep separate things separate. Compartmentalization is not inherently dishonest. Most functional people compartmentalize. Diana had simply developed the skill to a degree I had never recognized because I had never had reason to look for it. We have 2 children. Marcus, who is 14, and Jess, who is 11. Good kids, curious, kind, occasionally maddening in the specific ways that 14 and 11 produce. Marcus has my father's build and Diana's instinct for people. Jess has my mother's precision and Diana's laugh. They are the best thing in my life, and the reason I could not afford to simply collapse when the phone rang on that Tuesday evening. Our finances, the joint account, specifically, represent 16 years of combined saving and careful management. The $47,000 the man across town was attempting to withdraw was approximately 30% of that account's total. It was not catastrophic if stopped. It would have been devastating if completed. That is the life I was living at 7:43 p.m. on a Tuesday in April, when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I need to tell you that because it is the kind of detail that makes you understand how close the entire thing came to going a completely different way. If I had let it go to voicemail, the teller would have logged the failed verification, flagged the transaction, and protocol would have taken over. The withdrawal would likely have been blocked. The situation would have been discovered differently, with paperwork and delayed revelations rather than in real time, on my own couch, with the person at the center of it sitting close enough that I could hear her breathing. But I answered. The woman from the fraud department was professional and unhurried. She introduced herself. Her name was Paula. She was from the verification team, and explained that she was calling about a large withdrawal request currently being processed at the Westerville branch. Standard verification call, she said. Just a few questions to confirm authorization. I said yes, go ahead. She said, we have a withdrawal request for $47,000 from the joint checking account ending in 4471. Can you confirm this is an authorized transaction? I said, I haven't authorized any withdrawal today. A brief pause. The professional kind, the kind that means she is noting something without expressing it. She said, Sir, your wife is currently at the branch with a gentleman who has presented identification in your name. He has provided the account number and has correctly answered security questions. Can you confirm whether you authorized a representative to act on your behalf? I said, I'm sorry. What gentleman? And that is when I looked to my left. Diana was watching the television. She had been watching the television, or appearing to watch it, for the past 40 minutes. She was holding a glass of wine, the second of the evening. I had poured it for her myself. She was in the clothes she had come home in, her shoes off, feet tucked under her on the couch the way she always sits. She looked entirely ordinary. She looked like a Tuesday evening. Until I said, what gentleman? And her body did something that bodies do when a person receives unexpected information while trying not to receive it. A small, involuntary stillness. Not guilty movement. The opposite. The stillness of someone very suddenly not moving at all. The teller was describing him. She said it matter-of-factly, the way you recite a description when you are looking at someone standing in front of you. Medium height, she said. Dark hair with gray at the temples. Mid-40s. Well-dressed. A dark blazer, she thought. Very calm. Polite manner. I am 5'11". My hair is dark with gray at the temples. I am 47. I own 3 dark blazers. Everyone who knows me describes me as calm. I said, Paula, do not process that withdrawal. Flag it immediately. I am the account holder, and I have not authorized this transaction, and I am not at your branch. She said, Sir, I'm going to need to put you on a brief hold while I contact the branch directly. I said, Please do. Hold music. The particular corporate hold music that sounds like it was composed to communicate neither urgency nor comfort. I looked at Diana. She was still not moving. The wine glass was in her hand. The television was still on. She was not looking at me. I said her name. She turned. And what I saw on her face in that moment, I have tried, in the months since, to describe it accurately without dramatizing it. It was not guilt, exactly. It was not panic. It was the expression of a person whose 2 separate worlds have just made contact for the first time, and who is experiencing, in real time, the particular vertigo of that collision. She said, Nathan. I held up my hand. Not angrily. I was on hold with the bank, and I needed to think clearly, and thinking clearly is what I do, and I was going to do it. Paula came back. She said the branch had been notified. She said the transaction was being suspended pending investigation. She said she needed me to come in as soon as possible with identification. She gave me a case number and the name of the branch manager. I wrote it down. On the notepad I keep by the couch because I am the kind of man who keeps a notepad by the couch. I hung up. I looked at my wife. I said, Talk. I want to tell you what Diana said, and I want to tell it to you with the same precision I have tried to apply to everything else in this story, because the truth is not a clean thing, and I am not going to make it clean for the sake of a simpler story. She did not deny it. I want to give her that. Some people, when their constructed world makes contact with the real one, choose denial as their first response. Diana did not. She set her wine glass down on the coffee table, carefully, precisely, as if the placing of it mattered, and she looked at me with those eyes that I had looked into for 16 years, and she told me the truth, or the beginning of the truth. The truth, I would learn, has layers, and you only get the first layer in the first conversation. His name was Derek Solis. She had known him for 2 years. He was a contractor, not a building contractor, a business one, who had done project management work for her firm on a commercial landscaping job in 2022. They had met professionally. It had become something else. She said, "I know there is nothing I can say right now that makes this." I said, "Don't. Not yet. Tell me about the bank." Because that was the thing I needed to understand first. Not the relationship. Relationships, however devastating, are a category of thing I knew existed in the world. The bank was the thing that made no sense. The bank required explanation before anything else. She said Derek had financial problems. She said she had been helping him. She said she had given him access, not formal access, not a joint account, but she had shared the account number, had told him the security questions and their answers, had at some point, in some conversation I was not present for, communicated enough information for a man to walk into a branch with a fake ID bearing my name and my physical description and attempt to take 30% of what we had built together. I sat with that for a moment. I said, "You gave him my information." She said, "I didn't think he would." I said, "Diana, you gave him my identity. You gave him enough information to impersonate me at our bank. That is not a relationship problem. That is a crime." She was very quiet. I said, "How much have you already given him?" Another layer of the truth. She had made 3 previous transfers, smaller, from a savings account I monitored less closely, over the past 8 months. $12,000 total that I had not noticed because the amounts were distributed and the timing was irregular, and I, the numbers man, the accountant, the man who finds comfort in reconciled accounts, had not been watching our personal finances with the scrutiny I applied to my professional ones. $12,000 and an identity handed to a man I had never met, who was currently being detained at a bank branch in Westerville while hold music played on my phone. I stood up. I got my jacket. I got my keys. Diana said, "Where are you going?" I said, "To the bank. And then to the police station. And then, I don't know. But right now, to the bank." She said, "Nathan, please." I said, "The children are upstairs. Don't wake them. I'll be back before midnight." I drove to Westerville. If you have ever had the ground shift under your feet in a moment you thought was completely ordinary, hit the like button right now. We are just getting started. The Westerville branch manager was a man named Gary, who was the kind of calm that comes from 20 years of managing difficult situations without raising his voice. He met me in the lobby, verified my identity with 3 forms of ID and a video call to the fraud department, and then walked me through what had happened. Derek Solis, I would learn his full name later, had arrived at the branch at 6:15 p.m. with Diana. He had presented a driver's license in my name with his photograph. A well-made fake, not a cheap thing, Gary said, the kind of document that requires either connections or resources or both. He had the account number, the answers to 2 of 3 security questions, and a withdrawal slip for $47,000 made out to cash. The teller who handled the initial request, a young woman named Andrea, who had been with the bank for 8 months, had followed protocol precisely. Large cash withdrawals require supervisor approval and identity verification by phone. She had called the number on file, which was my cell, before processing. Derek had not anticipated that. Gary showed me, on a monitor in his office, the branch security footage. And I want to tell you what it is like to watch security footage of a man who is not you behaving exactly as you would behave in a bank. The posture, the calm, the way he stood at the counter, not aggressive, not nervous, the practiced patience of a man who expected things to proceed without complication. He was close to my height. His hair was dark with gray at the temples. He was wearing a dark blazer. I watched him and felt something I do not have a clean word for. Not quite the uncanny, not quite fear. Something more specific. The feeling of your own image being used against you. Of your own description becoming a tool in someone else's hand. Diana was on the footage too. She stood slightly behind and to Derek's right. Her body language was, and this is the word I keep returning to, because it is the precise word, practiced. She had done this before, or something like it. The comfort of her posture was not the comfort of someone in a normal situation. It was the comfort of someone executing a familiar role. I asked Gary where Derek was now. He said, "Police arrived about 20 minutes ago. He's been detained. There will be a detective in contact with you tomorrow morning about the identity fraud charges." I said, "And my wife?" Gary looked at me steadily. "She left before the police arrived, sir. She wasn't detained." I drove home. The children were asleep. Diana was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water and both hands around it, the way you hold something warm when you are cold. I sat across from her. We talked until 2 a.m. The full truth took 3 conversations over 4 days to emerge completely. Not because Diana was withholding strategically. I believe, by the end, that she told me everything. But because the full truth of a situation this complex does not arrive in one sitting. It arrives in layers, each one revealing the inadequacy of the layer before. Derek Solis was 49 years old. He had a history in project management and contracting that was real and verifiable. He was genuinely competent professionally, which is how he had come to work with Diana's firm. He was also, beneath a professional competence, a man with a gambling problem that had produced significant debt, a set of financial relationships with people who were not patient creditors, and a talent for presenting a composed surface over an increasingly unstable foundation. Diana had known about the gambling within the first 6 months. She had told herself it was manageable, that he was managing it. She had told herself a series of things that, from the outside, are easy to identify as rationalization and from the inside, I understand, feel like reasonable assessments of a complicated person. The money she had transferred, the $12,000, she had believed was helping him stabilize. She had not asked enough questions about where it went. She had not wanted to ask enough questions, which is different from not having the opportunity. The bank scheme she had not known about. She said this clearly and, by the 3rd conversation, I believed her, not because I trusted her instincts, which had demonstrably failed, but because the scheme required Derek to have access to my specific physical description, which he had obtained by watching me, by researching me, by, Diana admitted, asking her questions about my appearance, my habits, my schedule, that she had answered without understanding why he was asking. He had chosen a Tuesday evening because Diana had mentioned, in a conversation she did not remember having, that Tuesday evenings I was typically home by 6 and settled by 7 and unlikely to be at a bank. He had not anticipated that the bank would call. He had not anticipated that I would answer. He had not anticipated that my wife and I would be sitting close enough on a couch that I could hear her breathing change when a teller described the man she had come in with. Some plans fail on the smallest hinges. Detective Rosa Marino arrived at my office on a Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock, which was the time we had agreed on because I had meetings I could not move, and Detective Marino was the kind of professional who accommodates logistics without making you feel that the accommodation is a concession. She was thorough. I want to say that first, She was thorough in the way that makes you understand the investigation is being taken seriously. She recorded our conversation, asked questions in a sequence that was clearly structured rather than conversational, and covered the ground with a precision I recognized and respected. She told me what they had on Derek. The fake ID, a felony charge in Ohio. The attempted fraud, a felony. The actual transfers Diana had made, more complicated, she said, because they were made voluntarily, which created legal complexity around the question of coercion versus consent. She asked about Diana directly, whether I believed Diana had known about the fake ID scheme. I told her what I had concluded, no. She listened carefully and noted it. She told me what Derek was saying. He was cooperative, which she said usually means someone has already calculated that cooperation serves their interests better than resistance. He was providing information about his debts, his creditors, his financial situation, a picture of a man who had run out of visible options and had chosen an invisible one. She said, "Mr. Calloway, I want to ask you something directly." I said, "Please. Do you want to pursue charges against your wife for the transfer she made voluntarily?" I sat with that question for a long time. Longer than the pause suggested. I had been sitting with it since 2 a.m. on Tuesday, in varying forms, and I still did not have a clean answer. I said, "I'll let you know by Friday." She said, "That's fair." I walked her out. I went back to my desk. I stared at a spreadsheet for 45 minutes without processing a single number, which has never happened to me before in 23 years of working with spreadsheets. Then I called my brother. Don't go anywhere. What Nathan does next is the part of this story that changes everything. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming. My brother's name is Patrick. He is 44, 3 years younger than me, a high school football coach like our father, married with 4 kids, and a house that always sounds like a controlled emergency when you call. He is the person I have called in every genuinely difficult moment of my adult life, which is a short list because genuinely difficult moments had been, until Tuesday, relatively infrequent. He answered on the second ring. I could hear the background noise of his house. Kids, television, the specific domestic hum of a large and busy family. I said, "Pat, I need 20 minutes. He said, "Hold on." I heard him move through the house, a door close, the background noise drop. "Go." I told him everything. From the phone call to the hold music to the security footage to the 2 a.m. kitchen conversation. I told it the way I tell everything, sequentially, factually, without editorializing, which my brother has always said is both my greatest strength and my most maddening quality. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How are the kids?" I said, "They don't know anything yet." He said, "Good. Keep it that way until you know what you're doing." I said, "That's the problem. I don't know what I'm doing." He said, "Yes, you do. You just don't like the options." This is why I call Patrick. Not for comfort. He is not a comfort-first person. For clarity. He has a way of naming the actual situation without the coding that most people apply to difficult conversations. He said, "Tell me the question you're actually trying to answer." I said, "Whether to stay married to her." He said, "Is that really the first question? Or is the first question whether you can trust her?" I said, "Those are the same question." He said, "They're not. You can decide to stay married to someone you're working to trust again. You can decide you can't rebuild the trust and leave. But the question of whether to stay is downstream of the question of what she actually is. And you've known her for 16 years, And you're a precise man, and I think you have more information about what she actually is than you're currently letting yourself access. I sat with that. He said, "What does your gut say?" "Not your head. Your gut." I said, "My gut says she didn't know about the bank scheme." He said, "I believe you. What else does it say?" "It says she chose him over our family's financial security for 2 years and told herself a story about it that let her sleep at night." "Yes," he said, "that's the thing you have to decide about." We talked for another hour. When we hung up, I felt not better exactly, clearer, which for me is the closest approximation of better that is available in difficult situations. Marcus and Jess did not know anything was wrong for the first 3 days, which I consider one of the small logistical achievements of an otherwise catastrophic week. Diana and I had agreed, in the kitchen at 2 a.m., on 2 things that we would do regardless of everything else. We would not expose the children to the adult dimensions of this situation before they needed to know, and we would be civil to each other in their presence. These were not reconciliation. They were parenting. There is a difference, and Diana understood it as clearly as I did, which told me something about her that I filed without yet knowing what to do with. By Thursday, Marcus had noticed something. He is 14, which is old enough to read a room, especially a room he has lived in all his life. He came to find me in the study that evening, again, the chair across from the desk, the position of the serious conversations, and he said, "Dad, is everything okay with you and Mom?" I looked at my son. He has Diana's instinct for people and my face when something is worrying him, a particular quality of stillness around the eyes. I said, "We're working through something. It's adult stuff. You don't need to worry about it." He said, "Are you going to get divorced?" 14-year-olds ask questions with a directness that bypasses the defenses of adults. I have always appreciated this about Marcus, even when it is inconvenient. I said, "I don't know yet. I want to be honest with you about that." He nodded slowly. The nod of a person receiving difficult information and deciding to hold it with maturity. He said, "Is it something Mom did?" I said, "It's something that happened to our family. We're going to figure out how to handle it. Whatever happens, you and Jess are the first thing. Always." He said, "Okay." He got up. At the door he stopped and said, "Dad, I know you'll do the right thing. You always do." I sat alone in my study for a long time after that. The weight of being someone's model of how to handle things correctly, at the precise moment when you are least sure of how to handle anything, is its own specific kind of pressure. I sat there with it. Then I did what I do. I made a list. The list had 3 columns this time. The first column, what I know for certain. The second column, what I do not know. The third column, what I need to decide. I am going to tell you what was in each column, because I think the list itself is as honest a representation of where I was as anything else. What I know for certain. Derek Solis attempted to steal $47,000 from our joint account using a fake identity in my name. Diana provided the information that made this possible, not knowing it would be used this way. Diana transferred $12,000 of our money to this man over 8 months without telling me. She had a relationship with him that she concealed for 2 years. The criminal matter is in the hands of Detective Marino and will proceed independently of my choices. What I do not know. Whether Diana's relationship with Derek was motivated primarily by emotional attachment, financial manipulation on his part, or some combination that I do not have sufficient information to accurately assess. Whether the Diana who sat on the couch on Tuesday evening was the same Diana who had been there for 16 years, making a terrible error in judgment, or a different one who had been there all along. Whether the marriage can be rebuilt on something real, or whether what would be rebuilt would be a performance of the marriage rather than the thing itself. What I need to decide. Whether to pursue the question of Diana's legal liability for the voluntary transfers. What to tell the children and when. Whether to ask Diana to leave the house temporarily or remain. Whether I want to try. I looked at the third column for a long time. The last item, whether I want to try, I had written last and stared at longest. It is a simple question that contains a very large amount of information, the way simple questions tend to. I thought about 16 years. I thought about the laugh. I thought about the kitchen at 2 a.m. and the quality of the truth she had told me, not full immediately, but full eventually, and without deflection at the crucial moments. I thought about what Patrick had said, you know what she is, and you're a precise man. I thought about Marcus in the chair, saying you always do the right thing. I thought about what the right thing actually was, which turned out to be more complicated than either a simple yes or a simple no. Before we get to what Nathan decides, drop a comment right now. What would you have done? Stay or go? We read every single one. Derek Solis pleaded guilty to identity fraud and attempted grand theft in September, 6 months after the Tuesday evening on the couch. His cooperation with the investigation, which had revealed a pattern of similar schemes targeting other victims, earned him a reduced sentence. He received 4 years, with eligibility for parole at 2. I want to tell you what I know about Derek Solis beyond his crimes, because I think it matters for understanding the full shape of the story. He was, by all accounts from those who knew him professionally, genuinely talented. His gambling problem had begun, his attorney argued at sentencing, following a bankruptcy in 2017 that had cost him a business he had spent a decade building. I do not say this as mitigation. I say it as context, because context is how you understand things rather than simply categorize them. He had targeted Diana not randomly but deliberately. Detective Marino told me, after the investigation was complete, that Derek had identified Diana as a potential resource, her income, her stability, her apparent need for something her regular life was not providing, and had cultivated the relationship with the specific long-term intention of financial access. The emotional component of what Diana had experienced had been, on his side, largely manufactured. Not entirely. Marino said these things are rarely entirely one thing, but substantially. Diana, when I told her this, sat very quietly. Then she said, "I want to tell you I'm surprised." "I don't think I am," I said. "When did you stop being surprised?" She said, "About 6 months in, when I noticed he was more interested in our finances than I had realized. I told myself I was being paranoid." I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She said, "Because telling you would have required telling you everything, and I didn't want to lose what I had." I said, "Which was what, exactly?" She thought for a long time. Then she said, "I don't know how to answer that without it sounding worse than the actual truth." I said, "Try." She said, "I think I had stopped seeing our life clearly. Not because it was bad. It wasn't bad. But I had stopped seeing it. And he made me feel seen in a way that I mistook for real, and I held on to it past the point where I had any honest justification for holding on." This was, in my assessment, the most honest thing she had said across all our conversations. Not because it absolved anything. It did not. But because it named the actual human mechanism rather than explaining it away. I held it carefully. I am still holding it. I decided 3 things, in sequence, over the 30 days following the Tuesday evening. The first decision: I did not pursue legal action against Diana for the voluntary transfers. I made this decision for reasons that were not entirely clean, partly because I believed she had been manipulated more than she had acted freely, partly because the children's stability was my primary concern and legal action against their mother would not serve it, and partly because I am, underneath the precision and the numbered lists, a man who finds it very difficult to act in ways that cannot be reversed. Criminal charges against Diana could not be reversed. I needed more clarity than I had before I made an irreversible choice. Detective Marino accepted this without comment, which I appreciated. The second decision: I asked Diana to stay in the house. Not as reconciliation, as a practical acknowledgement that removing her from the children's daily life in the acute phase of the situation would cause damage I was not willing to cause. She moved to the guest room. We maintained a civil household. We told the children together that we were going through a difficult time and that we were working on it, which was true enough for their age and need. The third decision took longer. It required something I had not done in many years: a sustained and uncomfortable examination of what I actually wanted, separate from what was correct or logical or defensible. What I found, underneath the precision and the lists and the numbered columns, was this: I loved Diana. Not the Diana of the security footage, not the Diana of the kitchen table confession, but the Diana I had built a life with. And I was not yet willing to accept that those were irreconcilably different people. I was willing to find out. I was not willing to make the permanent choice before I knew. I told her that. On a Sunday morning, 6 weeks after the Tuesday. I told her I was not ready to end the marriage, and I was not ready to restore it, and what I was ready for was work. The kind of work that is not comfortable, and does not offer guaranteed outcomes, and requires both people to show up with honesty rather than hope. She said, "Tell me what that looks like." I said, "A therapist. Separate ones first. Joint ones eventually. Full financial transparency, every account, every transaction, reviewed together monthly. Complete honesty about anything that feels like it's going sideways before it goes sideways. No compartments." She said, "What if it's not enough?" I said, "Then we'll know we tried, and we'll have done it the right way." She nodded. Then she said, "Nathan, I know that what I did." I said, "Not yet. There will be time for that. Right now, I need to know you understand the terms." She said, "I understand them." I said, "Then we start Monday." I want to talk about the therapy because I think it is the part of this story that is most honestly useful, and because I am a man who did not believe in therapy before this year in the way that men of my generation often do not believe in things that require them to be uncertain in front of a professional. What I found, underneath the precision and the lists and the numbered columns, was this: I loved Diana. Not the Diana of the security footage, not the Diana of the kitchen table confession, but the Diana I had built a life with. And I was not yet willing to accept that those were irreconcilably different people. I was willing to find out. I was not willing to make the permanent choice before I knew. I told her that. On a Sunday morning, 6 weeks after the Tuesday. I told her I was not ready to end the marriage, and I was not ready to restore it, and what I was ready for was work. The kind of work that is not comfortable, and does not offer guaranteed outcomes, and requires both people to show up with honesty rather than hope. She said, "Tell me what that looks like." I said, "A therapist. Separate ones first. joint ones eventually. Full financial transparency, every account, every transaction, reviewed together monthly. Complete honesty about anything that feels like it's going sideways before it goes sideways. No compartments. She said, "What if it's not enough?" I said, "Then we'll know we tried, and we'll have done it the right way." She nodded. Then she said, "Nathan, I know that what I did." I said, "Not yet. There will be time for that. Right now, I need to know you understand the terms." She said, "I understand them." I said, "Then we start Monday." I want to talk about the therapy because I think it is the part of this story that is most honestly useful, and because I am a man who did not believe in therapy before this year in the way that men of my generation often do not believe in things that require them to be uncertain in front of a professional. My therapist is named Dr. Carl Webb. He is 58, formerly an accountant. I did not plan this. The universe apparently did, who retrained in clinical psychology in his 40s. He has the particular quality of not being impressed by anything, which initially irritated me and eventually became the thing I valued most about him. You cannot manage someone who is not trying to be managed. In our sessions, I talked about a great many things that I had assumed were filed and complete. I talked about my father and his particular model of correctness, the right answer, the right play, the right call, and how I had internalized that model in ways that had made me excellent at my work and possibly less present in my marriage than I had believed. I talked about Diana not as a person who had wronged me, but as a person I had been living alongside while both of us, in separate ways, had stopped fully seeing each other. This was uncomfortable. I want to say that clearly. Therapy is not a comfortable process when it is working. When it is working, it finds the things you have been successfully not looking at and makes you look at them. I had been successfully not looking at a number of things, including the degree to which my precision and control, my comfort in the numbers, my trust in the reconciled account, had translated into a kind of emotional absenteeism that was quieter than Diana's and less dramatic, but not less real. I am not offering this as equivalence. What Diana did was a specific and serious breach that had specific and serious consequences. I am offering it as the fuller truth, because the fuller truth is the only kind worth having. Dr. Webb said to me in our fourth session, "Nathan, what would it mean if this marriage was salvageable?" I said, "It would mean a lot of work." He said, "That's not what I asked. I asked what it would mean to you. Not the work, the outcome." I sat with that. Then I said, "It would mean my son was right. That I did the right thing." He said, "Is that the reason you want to save it? For Marcus?" I said, "No. It's the frame I use to make myself admit what the reason is." He said, "And what's the reason?" I said, "I want my life back. Not the version I had before Tuesday. That version had cracks I didn't know about. The real version. The one we could actually build." He nodded. He wrote something. He said, "That's the first thing you've said in 4 sessions that didn't come from your head." I said, "I know. It took a minute." He smiled. "It always does." If this story showed you something true about trust, about marriage, about the extraordinary ordinary moments where everything changes, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe if you haven't. We are here every single week. It has been 11 months since a teller named Andrea at the Westerville branch called to verify a withdrawal and changed the entire shape of my life. I want to tell you where things are, plainly, and without the kind of resolution that wraps neatly and suggests that everything has been repaired into something better than it was before. That is not where I am. That is not an honest description of where anyone is 11 months after a Tuesday like mine. Diana and I are still married. We are in joint therapy, working with a woman named Dr. Sandra Fitch, who has the quality of making uncomfortable silences feel productive rather than threatening. We have had conversations in that room that we did not have in 16 years of marriage, which tells you something about 16 years of marriage and also something about the specific value of a room with a professional in it. The financial transparency is real. Every account, reviewed together on the first Sunday of every month. It is not comfortable. The review surface makes visible things that comfortable couples prefer to leave in the background. But it is honest. And I find, as a numbers man, that I trust things I can see more than things I assume. Diana is working. Her firm kept her on. Her professional reputation is intact. Her work is still exceptional. The situation was contained enough that the professional world does not know what the personal world went through. She has been in her own therapy for 11 months. She is doing the work. I see her doing it, which is different from being told about it. Marcus knows more now than he did at 14. Not everything. There is a version of this story he will get when he is old enough that the complexity does not simply become a lesson in distrust, but enough to understand that his parents went through something real and are working on something real. He handles it with a maturity that I cannot entirely account for and am deeply grateful for. Jess, at 11, knows that her parents had a hard year and that things are better now. She accepted this with the particular resilience of children who are securely attached and have not been given reason to doubt the floor beneath them. The floor held. It mattered. Derek Solis is in a correctional facility in Central Ohio. I do not think about him often. When I do think about him, what I think about is not anger. I am past the acute phase of that, but something more like bewilderment at the specific calculation he made. That Diana was a resource to be accessed. That I was a description to be replicated. That $47,000 was worth what the attempt cost him. The math of it does not work by any accounting I know how to do. I am a numbers man. I believe in precision. I believe in the reconciled account. I believe that if you look at things carefully enough, with enough rigor and enough honest attention, you can understand what you are looking at. This year has taught me the limits of that belief. The account I failed to reconcile was not the joint checking. It was my marriage, the daily audit I had stopped performing somewhere in the comfortable middle years, when the balance seemed stable and the stability seemed permanent. I had trusted the number without verifying the components. That is a rookie accounting mistake, and I had made it for years. I do not say this to claim responsibility for what Diana did. She made her choices, and they were hers, and the consequences of them belonged to her. But I am a precise man, and precision requires me to be precise about my own role in the ecosystem that produced this situation. I was not absent. I was present in the specific way of someone who had confused routine for connection and assumed that the comfortable Tuesday evenings added up to a marriage that did not need active maintenance. They do not add up to that. Nothing does. A marriage is not a balance that achieves stability and stays there. It is a living account that requires constant, honest reconciliation. The moment you stop looking carefully is the moment the discrepancies begin. What the bank call gave me, and I use the word gave deliberately, because I have thought hard about the right word, was visibility. Sudden, brutal, complete visibility into a set of things that had been operating in the dark. Visibility is not a gift in the moment it arrives. It is a gift in retrospect, if you do something useful with what it shows you. I am trying to do something useful with what it showed me. Some days, this is more successful than others. On the successful days, I see a marriage being rebuilt on a foundation that is more honest than the one it replaced, more aware, more deliberate, more clear-eyed about the people in it, and what they actually need rather than what they have always assumed. On the less successful days, I sit in the Tuesday evening quiet with the same woman on the same couch, and I think about a teller named Andrea and a case number on a notepad and the particular sound of hold music, and I feel the distance between what I thought I had and what I actually had. Both of these are part of the truth. I hold both of them. Dr. Webb says this is progress. He says it with the understated certainty of a man who has watched a lot of people do this work and knows what it looks like when it is real. I take him at his word. He used to be an accountant. He knows about reconciliation. My name is Nathan Calloway. I am 47 years old. On a Tuesday evening in April, I almost didn't answer my phone, and the fact that I did rearrange the entire architecture of my life. A teller named Andrea followed protocol. A fraud department employee named Paula made a call. A branch manager named Gary showed me security footage of a man who wore my description like a costume. And my wife sat on the couch beside me, close enough to touch, while the world she had been keeping separate from mine made contact with a sound like something falling from a great height. I want to leave you with the thing I keep returning to, in the quiet moments between the work of rebuilding. The most dangerous place in any relationship, marriage, family, business, friendship, is the comfortable middle. The place where things seem stable, and so you stop looking carefully. Where the routine becomes the assumption, and the assumption becomes the blind spot. Where you are so accustomed to the person beside you that you have stopped actually seeing them, and they, perhaps, have stopped feeling seen. The bank call was a catastrophic way to learn to look more carefully. I would not recommend it. But I will tell you this, I look more carefully now than I have in years. At my accounts, at my children, at the woman on the couch beside me, at my own quiet comforts, which are not the same as thriving. If you are living in the comfortable middle of something important, look at it. Deliberately, honestly, before something else forces the visibility. The hold music, when it comes, is not pleasant. This has been a True Consequences original. If this story moves something in you, share it today with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are here every week with another story about the choices people make and what finds them afterward. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And tell us, what would you have done? We read every single one. Until next time, pick up the phone, look carefully, and reconcile the accounts that matter most.